Howdy, Upper Pony. Lonely Brony here, and we're starting in with Chapter 3 of Inner Demons by Sapphire Libra 3, findable on fanfiction.net. I figured to start throwing the warnings in front of every episode. Warning: this fanfic contains minor language. It will upcoming contain a somewhat of a rape scene. There are some adult themes of darkness and evil. Chapter 3: A Silent Cry for Help. Twilight found herself trotting through the dark forest. It looked like Everfree Forest, but when she ended up... Let me try that over. Twilight found herself trotting through a dark forest. It looked like the Everfree Forest, but when she ended up here, she didn't know where she was. Maybe she could figure out what was going on if she continued forward. Twilight sparkle. Whoa, what was that? Twilight stopped for a second and looked around, but she didn't see anything. She shrugged and continued forward. Twilight sparkle. There it was again. That voice, deep and dark. It sounded almost like a demon. She stopped again and began looking all around her. Eventually began looking at the trees. Hello? Who's there? I'm here. I'm always here. Who are you? Twilight looked to her left. Where are you? Behind you. Twilight got scared and instantly looked behind her but saw no one. Above you. All around you. Even within you. Within me? Twilight asked, her heart racing now. I have always been close to you, Twilight Sparkle. I don't understand. You were too young and pure to feel my presence, and that mare, Celestia, kept us apart. But no more. Twilight was getting worried. She found her legs shaking so much she could barely stand. It's time for us to be reunited. Reunited? What are you talking about? Our powers have awakened. Now, we must be one again. Except me in your heart. There was a rumbling, followed by loud footsteps coming from behind her. Twilight turned around and saw something huge and black approaching her. It was easily 2 stories tall, and had the initial shape of a dragon, only it was walking on all 4s, and had 4 demonic red eyes, 2 on each side of its face. Its teeth were sharp, and it did not look friendly. Twilight stared up at the monster in horror, and eventually found enough energy to run away from the beast. It gave a mighty roar and began chasing after her. It was much larger than Twilight, so it could cover much more ground than she could as she ran. She eventually turned to a corner and began running through a denser part of the forest. When the monster gave chase, it was greatly slowed by the trees in front of it. It eventually occurred to Twilight that she had to be dreaming. She was an expert lucid dreamer and an astral traveler, so she could wake herself up from dreams easily, which she just did. Normally, once she woke up and began lucid dreaming, she was able to wake up easily. This wasn't one of those times. What's going on? She screamed to herself. I know I'm dreaming. She eventually hit the edge of a cliff. She looked down and saw a dark gray ocean under her. Long way down, but if she jumped off, she might be able to. The dragon chased her coming out of the trees. It slowly approached her, growling softly to get her attention. Twilight looked up at the beast with fearful expression. She wasn't about to let this creature take her, and if this was a dream, this plan should wake her up. It was crazy, but what choice did she have? She couldn't die in a dream. At least, as far as she knew. She turned and jumped off the cliff. As she fell, her heart began to race. She didn't know if it was working. She wouldn't know either, not until she reached the bottom of her fall. The water was getting closer. 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 She felt herself bounce on the bed, as if she was falling on top of it. She looked around, happy to see she was in her room. Her plan worked. It had saved her from that monster. Well, what was that beast? Where did it come from? There was a loud knock on the door. The one that made her scream. Twilight? Spike asked from the other side. Are you finally up? Yeah, Spike. I'm up. Come in. The door opened, and Spike slowly walked in with a concerned expression on his face. I tried calling you, but you didn't answer, Spike explained. Are you okay? You looked upset. I'm fine, Spike, Twilight said. Just had a nightmare at all. Oh, okay, Spike said. You're going to Fluttershy's place, right? Yeah. Do you want to come? Sure beats sitting here by myself all day, Spike said. I'll wait for you downstairs, and began walking out of the room. Spike, wait! Twilight called out, sounding more afraid than she wanted to. What's up, Twilight? Spike asked, now more worried than before. Next time, just come in, Twilight said. If I don't wake up, please. Sure thing, Twilight, Spike said slowly. He then walked out of her room, leaving Twilight to herself. She knew she probably seemed paranoid to Spike, but she was worried that she would have that dream again, and she didn't want to find out what would happen if that monster got a hold of her. Just in case she didn't wake up on her own, she needed a lifeline. She just hoped that Spike would take her silent cry for help seriously. God, Celestia, she was becoming just like Rarity. It took her a few good extra minutes to get out the door, now that she had a look to maintain, but afterwards she and Spike made their way to Fluttershy's place. The walk there seemed to take longer than usual. To Twilight, it was as if every pony was staring at her, reading her. Was her fear that evident? Hey, Twilight! A loud voice said suddenly, making Twilight scream again. She turned around and breathed a sigh of relief when she saw Pinkie Pie sitting there. Oh, hi, Pinkie Pie, Twilight said. It's you. Pinkie Pie cocked her head to the side in confusion. You okay, Twilight? You seem a little jumpy, and I know jumpy. Oh, it's, Twilight said, looking away, wondering if she could tell any pony what she felt. I just had a bad dream, is all. You sure that's all? Pinkie asked cheerfully, although she managed to still look concerned. Well, yeah. She tried to convince herself of that, at least. Pinkie Pie frowned, looking at Twilight closely. Although she was a little spacey at times, Pinkie Pie was actually pretty sharp, so she could tell that Twilight was lying. She eventually shrugged and stepped back. Well, if you say so, Pinkie Pie added. I need to get going, Twilight said suddenly, running past Pinkie Pie, probably confusing the party pony, but she didn't care. For some reason, she just needed to get away. Twilight, slow down! Spike cried out, as if he was about to fall off. Twilight stopped and looked down. What's wrong with you? Spike asked. Ever since this morning, you've been acting really weird. Twilight began, unable to find the words. What was wrong with her? Why was she so scared all of a sudden? I just need to see Fluttershy. That's all, she said as she trotted off to Fluttershy's house, still at a much faster pace than her usual walking speed. Applejack was already there when she got there. Fluttershy was confused, of course, but she rarely said no to any pony, especially if the pony was her friend. After Applejack and Twilight explained the situation and what had happened yesterday, Fluttershy got to work checking on Twilight. You may be wondering what Fluttershy could have looked for, but many ponies don't know there are a lot of signs to the body to indicate whether something is wrong with the unicorn's magic. Dilated eyes, shaky knees, inflamed throat, sensitive or tender horn. Fluttershy checked them all, but she found none of these signs. Well? Twilight asked when Fluttershy looked like she was done. Sorry, Twilight, she said meekly. I didn't see anything unusual. But that can't be, Twilight said, suddenly looking really worried. Couldn't you check again? Maybe you missed something. I checked everything twice, Twilight, Fluttershy said. If you're still worried, I suggest seeing a professional, but I don't think there's anything wrong. Twilight began pacing around, trying to stay calm. Both Applejack and Fluttershy looked at each other, confused. I ain't no expert, but normally a pony is happy to hear they're fine, Applejack said. You don't understand, Twilight said softly, but then turned to them. No one understands. That's because you won't talk to any pony, Spike said. Twilight, ever since yesterday you've been acting weird. It's like you're afraid of something. That stuff got you all tense? Applejack asked, walking over to Twilight. It's okay. I told you, them fireworks just had you spooked. Ain't nothing wrong with you. I wish I were as sure as you, Twilight thought. The overflow of magic, the book, and now the dreams. She didn't understand anything. It was frustrating that it took Twilight all she had not to burst into tears. Twilight returned to the library and decided to occupy herself by immersing herself in her new books, which were actually really interesting. she learned there were actually spells that simply caused ponies excruciating pain. She thought that kind of magic scared her, but she knew that it was necessary to learn all kinds of magic. That is, if you were meant to be a master of magic. As she was reading, she found herself with a need to test some of those spells. Most of them weren't complicated, so she felt like she really could easily replicate these spells. Princess Celestia didn't tell her to actually attempt the spells, but she probably should, right? She heard snoring outside. Was Spike asleep? He was always sleeping on the job. Leave him alone for a second and he was asleep. It looked like the dark arts spellbook. She looked at the dark arts spellbook she was reading and suddenly got a sinister idea. She could fix him up real good with a small spell from here. Nothing lethal, just something to spook him a little. She crept out of her room and to the main auditorium of the library. She looked at the center and saw Spike leaning against the wall, holding a broom, fast asleep. Looking at him gave Twilight very dark emotions. It never failed. That was why chores took so long. Well, after this he'd never fall asleep doing chores ever again. Twilight approached Spike, her horn glowing a sinister red. She pointed her horn at Spike's forehead, closed her eyes, and focused on the images she wanted to send to him. After sending the images, she stepped back and watched the effect of her spell take hold. He began twitching uncontrollably, looked like he was some sort of mental stress. Had it worked? Did she actually induce a nightmare? She found herself fascinated mostly, but something inside her couldn't help smile seeing her work, seeing him moan, seeing him suffer. Wait, what was she doing? This was Spike. She used him as a guinea pig before she was testing her spells, but she never had anything to physically hurt him. Right now, he was in pain that she'd inflicted. She merely shot out a white burst of magic to wake him up. He looked around, relieved that it was all just a dream, and saw Twilight standing by the floor. Twilight! Oh, my Celestia, I just had the most horrifying dream. I mean, it started out as a good dream, but it changed all of a sudden. I saw Rarity staring at the edge of a cliff. She was calling for help, but the gems had turned into monsters. They kept me from... He noticed Twilight's expression because she had stopped. He must have noticed Twilight's expression because he stopped and began walking over to her. Twilight, are you okay? You look like you're about to cry. Twilight shook her head and ran off to her room, where she fell into her bed and wept loudly. She had just done the thing that she swore she'd never do. She turned her magic on one of her friends, with the intention of hurting them. The more she resisted, the more it seemed like it was true. She wouldn't accept that. She couldn't. It was all too frightening to think of that she was actually outside. Spike listened to her sobs. They weren't the sobs of some pony who was overstressed or someone who was overreacting. They were the sobs of someone truly scared. That kind of sob one only cries when something is seriously wrong, but they won't tell any pony. Twilight, Spike said softly. What's happening to you? Elsewhere, a small caravan was making its way to Ponyville. The pony driving it had been there before, many years ago, but she was disgraced and forced to leave. It was her own fault, though. She bragged about skills she didn't truly have, achievements she didn't really achieve, and claimed to do things that she didn't plan on doing. But she did them, and now things were different. She was a changed mare now. She had the new meaning of magic in her mind, and a whole new roster of achievements under her belt, and she was much, much stronger than she had been before. And it was time to show that pony who made her want to change in the first place. Alright, everybody. Yeah, I'm gonna include a link in the description for the other fanfic itself for you guys, because the ending of chapter 2 kind of cut off there, which I'm sorry. Found out the limit's 15 minutes exactly, so that's what I'm working with, blah, 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 all that junk. I actually wasn't even supposed to have this episode, but, like, if you see the audio change halfway through it all, around, like, the 9-minute mark, I actually recovered this from a computer crash. But now, I'm feeling good. So, yeah, I will start uploading this right away, start recording the next chapter, and hopefully the project will continue. So, until next time, bye everybody.